Imagine a time so distant that even the ruins of our civilization have become cosmic dust. A time when humanity no longer reigns, it merely survives. This is the 41st century. Earth, once the cradle of intelligent life, is now just a neutral shadow on the star map. Not out of weakness, but by choice. For millennia, it observed interplanetary wars without taking sides. It grew in silence, adapting, rebuilding after centuries of self-destruction. And when first contact with alien civilizations occurred, it chose diplomacy, neutrality. But the universe is not a place of peace. While Earth hid behind treaties and interplanetary protocols, two superpowers emerged from the depths of the galaxy. The Khar'dan, masters of genetic manipulation, capable of reshaping entire species with a mere gesture. And the Sythari, beings of pure energy, direct descendants of the primordial radiation of the Big Bang, as ancient as time itself. These races didn't just evolve, they dominated. For generations, the Khar'dan and Sythari battled for control of every known sector of space. Planet by planet, system by system, technology by technology. In the midst of it all, Earth became a political satellite, neither ally nor enemy. Just an observer. But all neutrality comes with a price. And in the 41st century, that bill is about to come due. The conflict between the Khar'dan and Sythari isn't just a war. It's an open wound in the fabric of the universe. It began as a battle over star systems, but quickly turned into a war of ideologies. Science versus essence, flesh versus energy, creation versus existence. The Khar'dan believe all life can and must be shaped. Genetically perfected, corrected, redesigned. To them, natural evolution is a mistake. A slow, flawed, outdated process. The Sythari, they don't understand that mindset. They are pure consciousness, pure light. They've witnessed civilizations rise and fall while drifting through the energetic fields of the cosmos. They don't build weapons, they are the weapons. And so, what began as a philosophical divergence evolved into colossal catastrophes. Evaporated planets, collapsed moons, entire species erased, 3 light centuries of destruction, and the universe is exhausted. Alliances were made and broken. Neutral parties tried to intervene and were ignored. Time passed, and the balance shattered. Now even machines orbiting distant systems transmit constant warnings. Avoid war corridors. Avoid Sythari fields. Avoid Khar'dan swarms. And amidst this apocalyptic scenario, one question echoes through the halls of intergalactic power. How much longer can the universe endure? In the midst of impending collapse, an idea arose, never before considered. Not a weapon, not a surprise. Attack, but an agreement. A ceasefire, not just diplomatic, but symbolic. A gesture of mutual trust. Proof that perhaps the war could end. The proposal: choose a representative. Someone who's neither Khar'dan nor Sythari. Someone from outside. Someone neutral. A human. Earth, long silent, was summoned. Its people, though forgotten in cosmic affairs, were seen as rational, logical, and emotionally resilient. And despite the contradiction, that made them ideal to broker peace. Thus was born the Equilibrium Program, a joint effort from galactic superpowers supported by neutral systems to select a human ambassador, not a politician, not a soldier, but someone who could inspire trust on both sides, a bridge between matter and energy, between science and consciousness, and against all odds. Earth accepted. For the first time in centuries, humanity would return to the galactic center, not as a military power, but as a symbol of hope. He wasn't the strongest, nor the most influential, but he was the most unpredictable, and for that, the most trustworthy. Kael Draven was born in Jupiter's orbital colonies, far from Earth's old centers of power. He grew up among diplomats, scientists, and exiles from past wars. From an early age, he learned to read between lines, to read silence, to anticipate patterns. He earned a degree in interplanetary strategy before the age of 25. He served as a consultant in mining colony negotiations, a mediator in interstellar crises, and authored a thesis that redefined the concept of functional peace between non-human species. But it wasn't just his brilliant mind that made him stand out. It was his character. Kael didn't bow to interests. He wasn't afraid to speak the truth, even in front of hostile powers. And that made him dangerous, but also admirable. When his name was proposed to the Equilibrium Selection Committee, the reaction was shock. How could a civilian with no political ties or noble heritage represent Earth in a galactic agreement? But that's exactly why he was chosen. He owed no favors. He carried no flags. He appeared pure. Kael Draven would become the human ambassador at the intergalactic peace ceremony, a symbol of reason amid chaos, a mediator between beings who had long lost faith in diplomacy, and he accepted, convinced that even in the 41st century there was still space for ideals, for rebuilding, for peace. Or so he believed. The location was symbolic, Veloth Prime, a neutral space station constructed between Khar'dan and Sythari borders. It belonged to no one, and therefore represented everyone. For days, the universe watched in silence. Intergalactic broadcast channels followed every moment. Ships from all known civilizations hovered around the station, witnesses to what could be the rebirth of peace. Inside the ceremonial dome, the delegates took their places. The Sythari, pulsing fields of luminous energy, almost poetic in their form. The Khar'dan, imposing and stern, encased in adaptive exoskeletons, and in the center, Kael Draven, wearing the insignia of Earth, carrying in his eyes the hope of billions. His speech was moments away, but something was wrong. During the eye rituals, Kael felt a sting, then a growing pain, and then the visions, fragments, lights, memories he didn't remember living, images of laboratories, genetic codes, human silhouettes watching him as a baby, floating inside a capsule. His hands began to tremble, his eyes burned, the sounds around him distorted, as if a part of him was trying to wake up. At the very moment he reached out to seal the treaty between species, a convulsion overtook his body, and then everything stopped. Silence, panic, distrust. Kael collapsed to his knees, and in that moment, he knew. Something inside him was awakening, something he was never meant to discover. He awoke in an isolated room, sterile, cold, no windows, no time. Sensors scanned his body, metallic voices whispered in the background, but they weren't Khar'dan, nor Sythari. They were human, the Earth delegation. Kael was surrounded by scientists from the Planetary Defense Directive, a secret division that officially didn't exist. Men and women who, upon seeing him awaken, showed no surprise, only resignation. Then he heard the phrase that changed everything. "It's time to activate the protocol. The weapon is awake." He didn't understand at first, but the memories, the visions, they were returning. Not hallucinations, implants. Truths his body had always carried, but his mind was never meant to decode. Since before birth, Kael had been genetically engineered by Earth itself, part of Project Air, a covert operation funded through a secret alliance between humans and the Khar'dan. The goal? Create the perfect agent, Not a soldier, but a weapon disguised as a diplomat. Inside him was a synthetic organism, implanted at a cellular level. A bioenergetic structure that, once triggered, would release a parasite cloud, microscopic invisible entities designed with one purpose: infiltrate the Sythari and destroy them from within. And the ceremony was the trigger, the handshake. The symbol of peace turned into the beginning of extinction. Kael had been used, since birth, since before he could understand right from wrong. He was never the mediator. He was the surprise attack. The device within Kael wasn't mechanical. It was cutting-edge biotechnology, invisible, adaptive, undetectable by the Sythari. A living weapon, camouflaged into his DNA. They called it the parasite cloud, a swarm of microscopic, shapeless, semi-organic entities that connected to the Sythari's life energy. They didn't kill immediately. They were patient, sophisticated. They penetrated structures, frequencies, consciousness. They devoured light, consumed harmony, until the once radiant being became unstable, fractured, and finally, extinguished. The weapon left no trace, no explosion, no blood, only silence. And Kael, he was the vessel, the carrier, the sacrifice. The original plan expected him to never know, to fulfill his role, smiling for the cameras, shaking hands of light, dying as a martyr for a peace that never existed. But something failed. Maybe his body resisted. Maybe his mind fought back. Or maybe he was never as neutral as they thought. Whatever the case, the awakening of the parasite also triggered his consciousness. And in that moment, Kael Draven stopped being a silent instrument and became an unpredictable threat to everyone. Used the Sythari's goodwill, the Khar'dan's pride, and the anonymity of a rootless human to launch the greatest biological strike in cosmic history. And Kael, with his honesty, his spotless reputation, his carefully cultivated neutrality, was the perfect disguise. Now, knowing the truth, he was an anomaly, a risk, an error that needed to be contained or erased. Both the Sythari and the Khar'dan demanded answers. They suspected sabotage, and Earth had to erase the evidence before everything came to light. He became a target, to the Khar'dan, who feared what he now knew, to the Sythari, who felt betrayed, and to the humans themselves, who couldn't allow the weapon to start thinking for itself. Kael, once a symbol of unity, became the fragile link in a failed plan, the bearer of a truth too inconvenient to let live. And so, he ran. Not out of fear, but out of conviction. Because, in that moment, he understood. There were no more sides, no more good guys or bad guys. There was only chaos, and the choice not to be complicit in it anymore. The escape was improvised, chaotic, desperate. Kael hijacked a scout vessel from the station and crossed the Nebaris Belt, a field of electromagnetic storms where few dared to enter. But he had no choice. It was that or be shot down by any of the three factions. Alone aboard the ship, he finally had time to think. Not just about who had betrayed him, but about who he was now. No longer an ordinary human, no longer an ambassador, but not just the weapon they built either. Kael had become a new kind of entity, a man who carried destruction within him, but chose to resist it. As he fled, he began collecting data, fragments of Project Air, evidence of the secret alliance, genetic maps that might just maybe disable the parasite cloud without triggering its release, and more than that. He began receiving signals, encoded transmissions, messages from other beings, other species, who had also been deceived, victims of experiments, survivors of veiled massacres. The resistance was scattered, flagless, homeless, but alive, and it needed a symbol. Someone who understood the system from the inside, someone who carried the weapon, but refused to pull the trigger. Kael became that someone. The fugitive turned myth. The myth, hope, and among the wreckage of the stars, a new purpose was born, not just to survive, but to fight. The universe was still breathing, but barely. Trade routes were paralyzed, neutral alliances crumbled, and rumors of the human weapon spread like a new plague. Kael, now hunted, became a legend. Some saw him as a traitor, others a martyr. But a few saw him for what he truly was, a breaking point. In the outer edges of the galaxy, the resistance began to take shape, not as an army, but as a network of exiles, of deserters, of forgotten artificial intelligences, of beings who believed the collapse could still be stopped, but time was running out. The Sythari, wounded by the existential threat, began to reorganize. The Khar'dan, bitter over the plan's failure, intensified their advances, and Earth sank into the most dangerous silence of all, denial. As worlds braced for the worst, Kael wasn't seeking vengeance. He was seeking balance. He knew he couldn't undo what had been done, but he could prevent the end from being born of lies. He could fight for a new alliance, one not based on control or destruction, but on truth. And so, in the deep silence between the stars, as the galaxy held its breath, Kael Draven became something no power had foreseen. Not the weapon, not the hero, but the spark of a new era, and what seemed like the end might just be the beginning.